It's been a busy year for our forces and our various first responders.
A visit to the flood-ravaged Fraser Valley by the Prime Minister today, just as more storms are forecast to hit this weekend.
What's your name? Ted. Ted. Great to meet you. Where are you from, Richard?
And while Justin Trudeau surveys the damage, the province is stressing the need to prepare for more flooding and more highway shutdowns if necessary. Meanwhile, people on the ground bracing, are tired.
And the people from here to Spence's Bridge that will probably never see their houses again, they are the ones that I feel bad for.
Hoping for an end soon so they can begin the long road to recovery. Good evening and thanks for joining us. We are waiting for the Prime Minister to speak on the flood situation here in BC. We'll break in live to that when it happens. But first, let's start with Justin Trudeau's first visit to see the devastation. He spent the day touring hard-hit Abbotsford as the area waits for 2 more storms.
There is nothing quite like seeing the damage firsthand, or rather stepping through it. This was a front lawn until this creek burst its banks, pouring through the community. The Prime Minister visiting today briefly, his first to BC since the destructive storm, as soldiers work to shore up flood defenses.
12 days ago, the water would have been above my head here, so things have improved. But the cleanup, it's going to take months, if not years, cost billions. And that's before we even talk about the necessary improvements to flood defenses, which have been proven to be woefully insufficient.
And quickly, 2 new storm systems on Saturday and then Tuesday are set to bring more rain collectively than the system which caused catastrophe. And no one is quite sure what'll happen.
And the ground is supersaturated. This is a situation we have never faced before.
It's not just that 20 centimeters of rain is expected, but the system will melt snow at higher elevations, pouring down into valleys and again threatening to overwhelm highways and inundate communities.
Unleashing 3 storms back to back to back, it's our responsibility to allow all of the other parts of society to know how serious that could be. And again, I can't overstate the uncertainty.
My fear is if the Nooksack overflows again.
The Prime Minister was able to drive to one community where the water has receded. Some areas, though, are only accessible by air, like the Shaken First Nation, caked in a meter of mud that trampled and crushed most everything in its path. As much as this is BC's nightmare, it'll also be the federal government's problem. Not just sending in soldiers, but digging into a much deeper wallet to help repair and react to increasingly frequent and destructive weather disasters. David Common, CBC News, Abbotsford, BC.
And once again, we will be hearing from the Prime Minister shortly. We'll go live to that when it happens. Now, there's really no doubt about it. So many are feeling exhausted from the flooding and the cleanup efforts. It's starting to wear. John Hernandez is live in Abbotsford right now. John, what are people telling you?
Yeah, it's safe to say people are tired, Anita. It's very tough working day after day after day amid all this uncertainty. Now, I'm at Albert Dick Memorial Park in Abbotsford, just near the airport where Prime Minister Trudeau touched down earlier today. Behind me, a busy sandbagging station where all day and now into the night, people have been driving up, loading up, and taking sandbags back to properties across the region. And safe to say, some of the people I spoke with today are bracing themselves for the next downpour.
With the rain in the forecast, it's pretty hard to relax.
It's been a roller coaster 2 weeks for Michelle Pottinger and the rest of the crew at WestGen Farms. They're among the many farmers who made dramatic efforts to save their livestock.
Our barn and our office all got flooded, so we had to evacuate our cows. Luckily, all of them got out safely. And now we're kind of just preparing for the next storm.
The rain is expected to dump down over the next 5 days in the Fraser Valley.
Part of our challenge in planning for the next few days is that any additional rain we receive will be introduced into an existing flood area where water levels are already high.
The prospect is weighing on farmers.
Yeah, it's been a long couple of weeks for everybody involved, for sure. Yeah.
And on volunteers.
I don't really want to focus on the negative side, and the weather is going to rain. It's going to rain. I don't know what the infrastructure can handle, but I know that my neighbors are nervous.
Darnell Barkman, who's been helping lead volunteer efforts in the nearby community of Yarrow, is trying to catch his breath.
People care, and I think a lot of us are starting to feel that we're stretching ourselves. And so that's hard to acknowledge, and but we also want to be realistic and know that we have capacity, and we got to keep banding together and letting people take shifts.
And for those in need, more supplies are coming through. The province says important transportation chains are coming back online.
We're seeing broader supply chains come back to life as well. CP has been running its trains since Tuesday. CN is hoping to get restarted shortly. Airlines have increased their cargo capacity, so we're seeing flights delivering supplies to communities around BC.
We're also hearing the feds are helping clear that backlog at the port by adding more capacity for storage containers in Richmond. In the end, this will help start replenishing grocery store shelves in BC. And just quickly, Anita, ahead of tonight's show, the province did announce that it's suspending travel on some highways across the region, or across the province, in anticipation of the rainfall event. That includes Highway 3 between Hope and Princeton, Highway 99 between Pemberton and Lillooet, and Highway 1 between Hope and Popcom. Anita.
And John, I can't help but notice what's going on behind you there, people filling those sandbags. Are they filling those bags for where you are? Or are they going to be taking them somewhere else?
Yeah, these are all volunteers. They're basically saying, you give us a call, you say you need sandbags, we'll take them right to you. They're actually loading up for an Indigenous community in the area. And a big question here is, as they're hearing all these stories about Trudeau making a big announcement out in Clayburn, they're actually saying they would love to see him here helping them load up bags into the back of their trucks.
Well, he did land at the airport right nearby there earlier today. So I think he's in Victoria now, not going to make an appearance, but definitely hardworking people behind you there. Thanks, John. And these floods have left so much garbage, but also people's destroyed belongings now just sitting in piles on streets, farms, and train tracks. A group of companies are coming together to help make sure recyclable materials don't end up in the landfill. As Janella Hamilton reports, there's a lot to clean up.
The EnviroCorp glass recycling plant is running at full speed after operations shut down for 3 days because the machines were underwater. Now workers are trying to deal with the backlog of glass coming in from collections across the province.
We do Whistler to Hope for Encorp for sure, and the Vancouver Island, interior to Kelowna, and Lower Mainland and Close comes here.
And while the glass recycling plant is back to business as usual, most landfills and transfer stations in Abbotsford remain closed, giving people limited options when it comes to disposing of the debris from their damaged properties.
The amount of vehicles coming to the Mission landfill has increased by about 50%, and which has resulted in a tonnage increase of 100%. And a good part of that is coming from Abbotsford.
As Zavito says, within that waste, they are seeing hazardous materials such as drywall and insulation and other materials that should be handled in a specific way.
When you're getting a demolition load in, they try to separate out to some degree the materials, and there's certain standards that we set that we're still not going to flex on. Like you've got to pull out your hot water tank and make some effort to separate some of the wood, but some of the materials, it'll just be too mixed up.
So Monday we'll have bins and sorting cages.
After seeing huge piles of waste headed to the landfills that remain open in Mission and Chilliwack, a group of companies will be setting up a temporary transfer station, getting hands-on to help out.
We'll be separating and sorting all of the debris that shouldn't be in the landfill, such as cardboard, drywall, glass, plastics.
Come Monday, this empty lot on Fraser Highway in Langley will be filled with volunteers and sorting stations.
Our landfills are extremely fragile. If we don't act and if we don't divert from our landfills, it's going to have a greater impact on the environment.
Once the garbage is sorted, it will stay at this site until it can be delivered elsewhere. The city of Abbotsford hopes their 2 permanent transfer stations are up and running by next week. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Abbotsford.
You're looking at a live shot right now inside the legislature in Victoria as we await Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Premier John Horgan. They are expected to speak in about 5 minutes, and we'll be breaking into that live. We'll bring it to you right as it happens. Again, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau expected to speak shortly at the legislature in Victoria. Well, the floods have compromised the quality of well water in some of the hard-hit areas, raising serious health concerns for residents with farmers and thirsty livestock. But Olivia Stefanovic is finding out some experts are warning drinking water beyond the affected areas could be contaminated as well.
The high water mark is just behind you here.
There normally isn't a pond on Doug Johnstone's family farm.
The fire pit is a water pit right now. We're not going to be burning for a while.
The flood reshaped this landscape. Now concern is sinking in over what it brings.
You've had manure pits potentially overflow. You've had septic fields overflow. So the water that's in the fields that has to drain away is a veritable cesspool.
About 700 properties on the Sumas Prairie are under a do not consume water advisory, meaning it's not safe to even boil, only flush. Debris like tires and large farming equipment can be found floating all around. But what concerns residents isn't so much about what can be seen, it's about what can't.
We know there are hazardous and potentially toxic material in these floodwaters, which is why we need to complete an environmental assessment of the area to ensure it is safe.
Experts fear the impact may reach beyond the borders of the current advisory.
Even though flooding might take place in one location, there could potentially be subsurface flow of those contaminants that could get into other people's drinking water supplies.
She's urging private well owners to test their water quality, whether they're in the flood zone or not.
If you are on a private well, just remembering as a well owner that your water supply is your responsibility.
The province says it's monitoring the threat.
But there is significant attention paid to water quality and the ability to make sure that when people go back, it is safe for them.
Until Johnstone knows his supply is safe, he's hauling in water from the city for his kennel dogs. Just one more task as he yearns to return to a normal routine. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Abbotsford, BC.
The Trans Mountain Pipeline could get restarted early to the middle of next week. It would be at reduced capacity, but would help our current gas supply. The pipeline voluntarily shut down last Sunday when the heavy rainfall first hit, but Trans Mountain says it's made considerable progress to start up again at reduced capacity. It's working to rebuild its delivery points at Kamloops, Sumas, or Burnaby. This is while BC is bringing in more gas supply on barges from the U.S. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe is here now. And Joe, we talk a lot about the interior and the Fraser Valley when it comes to this flooding, but what's happening in Tofino right now?
Yes, Anita, the atmospheric river that we saw yesterday luckily didn't have huge impacts in the Fraser Valley, 40 to 60 millimeters. The bullseye was on the west coast of Vancouver Island. They saw close to 200 millimeters. Take a look at what folks on the west side were dealing with today. This is a picture of Mackenzie Road in Tofino down to the beach. A lot of flooding in and around Tofino. So they took the brunt of it yesterday. These atmospheric rivers are so narrow, a shift in just, a few dozen of kilometers can really change the game. Taking you to the satellite and radar right now, this next atmospheric river that all eyes are on, this looks to be farther south. So unfortunately, the bullseye for this one coming in for Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley. That's why there's been so much concern about this weekend intense river event. You can see the first of the rain bands just crossing into Port Renfrew and Sooke right now, where they are sandbagging as well for 150 millimeters possible on the island. We are very concerned about the 60 to 120 millimeters for Abbotsford, particularly the mountainous areas where we'll also see additional snowmelt. So just to put it into context, we saw 250 millimeters for the same areas with that first rain event last Monday. But Anita, it's the cumulative effects of all of these events. And I want to talk about one after that on the BC River Forecast Center forecast coming up in a bit.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Thanks, Joe. During this storm, we've seen many people pull off complicated rescue missions to save animals, and that includes a pair of anglers who went out of their way to keep a fish in the water.
Here we go. We're at about 1.5 kilometers right now. Half a K go, get to the river.
The Fraser Valley Angling Guides Association received this video of a stranded surgeon yesterday somewhere between Agassiz and Hope. Their response? Find the fish and hike 2 kilometers in the water to bring it to safety, and they did just that. Public health officials in Canada are closely monitoring the new Omicron variant of the coronavirus. They point to concerns about the number of mutations it contains. The variant was discovered by South African scientists. There are only a small number of cases that have been reported around the world, but more will likely be identified in the coming days as health agencies concentrate their search for it. We will have more on this later in the show. Now, the federal government is implementing a new travel ban on several South African countries because of that new variant. But these new restrictions come at a time when BC has been making significant progress in reducing transmission. For more on this, we bring in Justin McElroy. Justin, you're always watching our trends closely. 341 new cases being reported today. What are you noticing with the latest numbers?
341 cases, the lowest on a Friday in a long, long time in British Columbia. And it continues a trend we've been seeing pretty consistently for the past few weeks. So this is a board we've looked at a lot. The red line is active cases. The yellow line is the rolling average of new cases. The blue line is a hospitalization. And you can see all of them going downwards right now. We're about at 50% transmission of where we were at the height of the fourth wave in the middle of September. And we're seeing, in the past, we could say, well, the north transmission is still high. There are still pockets where we're seeing huge outbreaks. But if you take a look at this chart, which shows the 5 health authorities in BC, that line for northern BC has gone down sharply in the past few weeks. The other 4 regions in British Columbia quite low and remaining fairly stable. It's showing that the framework that the province has is at the very least ensuring that we're not seeing a rise up in cases and is getting numbers down to a point where our hospitals have about 40% less people in them than their peak, and that the province believes right now that their approach is one that is paying dividends.
Well, that is good news. We have, however, had 6 more deaths since yesterday in BC. We've talked in the past how the spike in deaths has remained high. Is that still the case?
And what's happened in the past is because deaths are a lagging indicator of where transmission is 3 or 4 weeks previously. But if you look at this chart and you see there's been a fairly big decrease over the past 2 or 3 weeks now. There were 6 deaths today. We're looking at around 4 a day. It's still high. It's still higher than Ontario and Quebec and several other places, but you can start to see the effects of that decrease in transmission that we've been seeing over the past 6 weeks starting to show overall in fatalities. Of course, the booster shots that have been given to people in all long-term care homes also having an effect there. But the big question with this new variant is how it will affect people, whether we need more boosters there, and the province as well as Canada and many other countries going to be watching the data closely to see if new measures are needed because of this new variant or whether the current framework that the province has will be effective against this new variant.
Justin McElroy for us tonight. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Anita.
A man who shot at an RCMP detachment in Vanderhoof yesterday has been charged with attempted murder.
Oh my goodness.
Paul Nicholas Russell is accused of trying to kill a peace officer with a firearm. The RCMP says it believes the shooting was a targeted attack, which forced police to send an emergency text alert to the community, urging everyone in the area to stay inside and lock their doors. More than a dozen employees were working in the office at the time of the incident. The RCMP says the detachment will be closed to the public until a forensic examination is done. Well, the Vancouver man known for hosting notorious penthouse parties in spite of COVID restrictions is back in jail. Mohamed Movasagi has been sentenced to 29 days in custody, 12 months of probation, and a $10,000 fine. The charges stem from for-profit parties he hosted at his apartment near Richards and Georgia in downtown Vancouver. Movasagi has pleaded guilty to 2 counts of failure to comply with an order of the health officer and 1 count of selling liquor. In the fight against COVID-19, the world is turning its attention to Omicron, a new variant of concern. What health officials know about it, what risk it could bring, and how Canada is preparing. Next. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. The Sumas Prairie in Abbotsford was one of the hardest hit areas in the province during the BC storm last week. Our drone operator took to the skies today to see how that region has recovered so far. Have a look. In the bottom right of your screen, you can see we are waiting for the Prime Minister to speak in Victoria about our flooding situation. We'll break into that live when it happens. But first, more COVID news now. The World Health Organization says Omicron, the latest COVID-19 variant, is a concern. South African. We are going to take you live now to Victoria, where the Prime Minister and Premier John Horgan are about to speak. Have a listen.
Is it me?
I'll start, sure. Good evening, everyone. It is a real pleasure to be here tonight with Prime Minister Trudeau on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nation. It is a real thrill to have the Prime Minister here today, standing with British Columbians in one of our most difficult times. And it's having government-to-government meetings, as the one we just concluded, having a flyover and visiting with people in Abbotsford, as Minister Farnworth and the Prime Minister did today, that brings this issue home for all Canadians. British Columbia is in stress and in crisis as a result of successive weather events and, of course, a global pandemic. But today we've established a joint committee of ministers, federal and provincial, to work together, co-chaired by Minister Farnworth and, of course, Minister Bill Blair from Ottawa. We'll populate that committee with appropriate ministers to make sure that all of the issues that are before us as governments are being addressed in a timely way and ensuring that we're doing what we can to protect people and property going forward. We also committed today that the two governments will match dollar for dollar the contributions Canadians make to the Red Cross Fund to help those who are in flood and extreme weather conditions here in British Columbia. So I encourage British Columbians and others to give $1, and there'll be $3 going towards helping people in distressed areas. No corner of the province has been untouched by this crisis. We've seen, of course, extraordinary devastation in the Fraser Valley, but the devastation in the Nicola Valley is equally catastrophic. It's been a very, very tough year for British Columbians. We're facing the brunt of climate change, not in the future, but right now. Our farms have been flooded, our roads have been washed away, and our communities are underwater, and more rain is coming. This has followed droughts and wildfires and heat domes this past summer. And I think it's important for Canadians to understand that the community of Merritt, the resilient community of Merritt, was facing drought conditions in May, wildfire conditions in June and July, and now flood conditions in the fall. Unprecedented to be evacuated at one time of the year because of wildfires and smoke, and then at another time in the same year, just months later, as a result of flooding and devastation. But the charity and goodwill of Canadians always shines through, and I am so proud of British Columbians and people from coast to coast to coast who have stepped up and offered help to British Columbians in our hour of need. And for our citizens who have taken in strangers, who have put their lands available to other people, and of course, more importantly, have been there to help people, whether it's be working to get livestock to high ground, sandbagging into the wee hours of the morning. Canadians, British Columbians come together in times of crisis. And we have been facing successive crises. We're still in the grip of a global pandemic. We absolutely understand the challenges of climate change, but to have two governments working together, to have genuine partners in Ottawa is something that British Columbians welcome and something that I'm very grateful that the Prime Minister came to talk to us about today. Despite the devastation, despite the challenges, we are rebuilding. Our supply chains are in good shape because people are not hoarding groceries and gasoline. Our supply chains will need to withstand further stresses as we go through the winter and into the spring. But working together, understanding that each other is as important as those ahead of us and those behind us, means that as we visit our grocery stores, as we visit gas stations, we're going to be okay. British Columbians need to hang together. I've been saying this now, it seems, for the past 2 years. And we have been successful as a community and as individuals and as families because we have hung together. I want to thank the Prime Minister for being here today to reinforce that message that we as Canadians, wherever we may live, are working together to get through this crisis. And I'll pass the microphone on to the Prime Minister.
Thank you, John. Quel plaisir d'être ici ce soir avec le Premier ministre Horgan,
with Premier Horgan, and have the opportunity to speak directly to the people of British Columbia, to tell them that we are with them and support them.
John and I agreed on and have always agreed on is the need to have people's backs during tough times. And that's exactly what we've been focused on and exactly the work that we are doing. This afternoon, when I got to visit Abbotsford and see so many of the extraordinary community volunteers, members of the Canadian Armed Forces, emergency responders, and just leaders on the ground who are devastated and heartbroken, but also stepping up to be there, not just for themselves, but for their community, for their neighbors. It really does show the strength of British Columbians, the strength of Canadians, in that we're there for each other. We have each other's backs, and that's what allows and enables your governments to do that as well. Our first priority is to be there for people, which is why we've deployed over 500 Canadian Armed Forces members with helicopters and planes, almost $4.5 million straight to First Nations communities immediately to help them through this moment, and over $4 million for the Port of Vancouver. And as John just said, really pleased that the federal government and the provincial government are matching donations with the Red Cross. So $1 donated by you results in $3 of support for people on the ground who desperately need it. So as always, as Canadians are watching across this country, and hearts are going out to folks who are working really, really hard to rebuild their lives and build a stronger future, send them your support, because this is what we do as Canadians. We're there for each other. Premier and I spoke about the support that's needed both right now and into the weeks and months and, yes, years to come. And we will be there, whether it's immediate support on saving livestock, supporting our farmers who have our backs year in and year out. We need to and will have theirs. We met today, Minister Blair and Minister Farnsworth and I met with frontline workers and responders. And it's amazing to see the strength, the resilience, but also the pride of people who've been working long hours, back-breaking work as community volunteers, leaders, armed forces members, being there for each other. But it's not going to be enough for us to just be there now and in the coming weeks. We're going to need to be there for each other in the coming months and in the coming years. Here in BC, in Atlantic Canada, where storms are raging now, and everywhere across the country where extreme weather events are going to become more frequent. And the fight against climate change remains extraordinarily important, but the fight to build a better future, resilient infrastructure in ways that is going to require our governments, municipal, provincial, federal, Indigenous, to work together always tighter and better is going to be really important, which is why I'm so pleased that John and I have put forward a joint cabinet committee that will deal with disaster response and climate resilience to map out the way forward here in British Columbia and establish a model for how we're going to move forward as a country facing increasing challenges like this. We've got a lot of work to do. But I can tell you one of the things that Canadians saw during this pandemic, particularly here in BC, which is when orders of government work together as friends, as partners, focused on the single-minded goal of having Canadians' backs, we can do it. And that's what we will continue to do. We do need to address the long-term climate change problems. And it can't be just about weatherproofing homes, although that's an important piece. We have to make sure we're investing in communities, investing in our country, getting our country to net zero, investing in support and indeed leadership by Indigenous communities whose traditional knowledge and approaches to challenging climate situations are well established and need to be at the table, not just for themselves, but for all of us. These are the kinds of things that we need to do going forward. And this is why government's grounded in science, in reason, in being there for each other, in compassion, but also in strength while working together is what British Columbians deserve and what all Canadians deserve. So I'm so pleased to be able to be with you here tonight, John, to continue this work. Nous avons beaucoup de travail à faire ensemble.
We have a lot of work to do together, but we will do it. We will continue to be there for the people of British Columbia. We will continue to be there for a better future for all in addressing climate change and in responding to the challenges we face today and building a better future for all.
To be here tonight alongside you, John. Great to be back in my second home in BC. Even if times are tough, we're going to get through this together. Merci.
Lindsay?
Thank you. As a reminder to everybody on the phone line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You're limited to one question and one follow-up only. We will start with questions in the room tonight. Richard Zussman, Global News.
Prime Minister, you mentioned support will be here for British Columbia. This is going to be expensive, both in the short term and the long term. How much financial support? Is this an open checkbook for British Columbia? And Premier, was there an ask of the Prime Minister in terms of how much financial support BC will need to get through this?
I have committed from the beginning that we will be here for whatever is needed. We need to rebuild. We need to rebuild more resilient infrastructure that's going to be able to handle 100-year storms every few years, because that seems to be the pattern we're on. It's going to be expensive, but it would be far more expensive to do less or not to do enough. Because we know, and we saw this in the pandemic, the best way to get through a crisis is to support people as much as they need through that crisis, because it gets us to the other side stronger and better. So what I've said to John, and what John knows, is that, and what British Columbians can and should know, is that the federal government will be there as a full partner as we move forward on building a better future.
And with respect to asks, it's premature to do that, and in fact was not the focus of our conversations today. The ground rules are pretty straightforward. I don't believe in the past 2 years we have spoken as leaders of our governments more than any time in the history of Canada, not just myself, but other premiers working collaboratively with orders of government. And I'm a student of federalism, and it works best when we talk to each other. It works best when there's a full understanding that every corner of the country matters. And with the Port of Vancouver in distress, the rest of Canada feels that. That's why premiers across the country have reached out to me. That's why businesses, labor organizations, volunteer organizations from all across the country are asking how they can help. And it's that goodwill that we need to build on today. The dollars, the costs will start to mount, and we stand ready. We are in a strong fiscal position in British Columbia by hard work of British Columbians, and we intend to invest that in the safety and well-being of people going forward.
Hello, Richard.
You mentioned 1 in a 100-year events. There could be another massive storm coming to British Columbia as early as over the weekend or into middle of next week. What will the federal government be doing to help support BC's preparation for that storm? And Premier, if you could reiterate the sort of work that's being done on the ground here in BC to help prepare as we brace for what could be coming.
Sure.
Well, first of all, what we are doing is being there to respond to any requests that British Columbia is making. BC, perhaps more than just about any other province, has an extraordinary system for emergency management and support. You've unfortunately had a lot of experience over the past years and have developed tremendous capacities. But what we can provide is extra bodies and hard work through CAF members who are there on the ground. Much of the work has been cleanup over the past days. The work that's going on now and into the coming days will be preparing for these new storms that are coming over the coming days. We are there to support in every way that British Columbia and British Columbians need.
And with respect to our highway system, never in our history have the 3 primary highways been fractured at the same time. The task, some 200 intrusions into Highway 3, Highway 5, the Trans-Canada. The Prime Minister and I talked about the Trans-Canada of old is not the Trans-Canada that British Columbians and Canadians understand. It's the Coquihalla. And the Coquihalla is broken, and it will take months to repair. We want to get it up and running for essential services and up and running for freight and other goods to be moving back and forth. And that is a collaboration between our 2 orders of government. That's fantastic news for British Columbians and indeed for Canadians who need to access the Port of Vancouver to get goods coming into Canada and, of course, to get those important products that we produce here to markets around the world. Our economy, our Canadian economy, depends on it. And that's why, again, for many people, they would assume, well, why, of course, orders of government work together all the time. That's why we put you in place. But it's in times like this that that's challenged and tested. And it's times like this that people step up, governments step up, individuals step up, businesses step up. And I'm very proud of where we got to today. But my message to British Columbians is we have more storms ahead of us. It's only November. There are challenging days and months ahead of us, and we need to protect each other. We need to be prepared. We need to listen attentively to Environment Canada's put in a new system of warning the severity of storms as they're coming forward. That will assist us with monitoring and preparing communities and individuals for what's coming ahead of us. But as the winter besets us in the interior particularly, that'll make it even more difficult for us to do the work we need to do on the highways. And that's
you are
why
listening to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Premier John Horgan touring the flood devastation in Abbotsford today. Trudeau did. And right now they are talking in Victoria, announcing that the federal government and the BC government will match every dollar donated to the Red Cross for this flood devastation. That means every $1 becomes $3 for a period of 30 days starting today. It'll also be retroactive for donations that have come in since the start of the flood campaign. You know, Trudeau, who went to Abbotsford today, referenced seeing the community volunteers, the armed forces, emergency responders, and people working together. He says it shows the strength of Canadians. He talked about the armed forces. They've deployed 500 members. And he says, you know, funding right now won't be enough, and they'll have to be doing something long term in order to not only address climate change, but also to help the people who have been devastated by the flooding. We will have more on this. Belle Puri will join us live shortly to talk a little bit more about what Trudeau and Horgan have announced today, because there is more. We'll first go to break.
3D printing is helping us not just live longer, but better.
The information for a three-dimensional printer is obtained from a CT scanner or a CAT scanner. When it finishes one print, it prints another layer on top and another layer on top.
Canadian surgeon Ivan Wong helped pioneer the use of 3D printed models in surgery. He uses them as a guide in order to prevent major operations down the road.
Viewing it is one thing, but our eyes are not perfect. You can use your finger and notice a little imperfection in any surface better than your eyes can pick it up.
Yeah, so this is that lump that we saw down there on the 3D model. Can you bring that back over towards me again, please, our model?
And the new information that we're getting, we can actually change the natural history of patients. So patients may not get arthritis if we are able to catch this early enough. Now we can actually print biological tissue. So they've been able to print different types of cells on there. They've been able to print different types of shapes that cells can grow into, different scaffolds. So these are all possible. And they can print multiple types of materials simultaneously using different extruders. This gives you the potential to print organs. And I really do think that this likely will happen within the next decade.
So what will be the next version of a Homo sapien?
And if the system is geared towards better medical care, everyone will become taller.
I would imagine their brains are getting bigger. It's going to be really interesting.
If we keep using dating apps to find partners, humans will evolve to have more beautiful faces.
The pinky toe is the less important of all and probably will disappear with time.
My new human would be able to repair, augment, live the same life you're doing now for much longer periods of time.
We imagine actually being able to control our evolution.
Surely we've discovered all the bits of this. No!
Time now to check in once again with meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe. And Joe, I know we keep talking about this series of storms. The next step, number 2 and 3, what do we know about them?
So we are really honing in on the details for this weekend storm. You know, we know that intense rain and snowmelt are the reason why we have both rainfall warnings and flood watches and flood warnings in place now for the South Coast. I want to take you through the timing of the next 2 storms, the big picture, so to speak. I've just put on the sort of forecast precip, so I haven't changed this to rain and snow, but watch as I time out the systems for you, with the first one to hit Saturday overnight into Sunday. We've got steady rain moving in for the southwest coast. I think I've got a graphic here to show you the yellows and oranges showing that heavier rain for the south coast. Know that Fraser Valley, you're going to get that 60 to 120 millimeter mark. We get a bit of a break for Monday into Tuesday, and then that next system rolling in at this point, Tuesday into Wednesday. There's a lot of uncertainty in that third storm. Some models have it just as strong as the weekend storm. Others have that fire hose sort of missing us completely. So here, as we get you through to that midweek forecast, there it is. The yellows showing the heavier rain. Here's Tuesday morning. This one coming from the Western Pacific, so it's a little harder to forecast for. The first 2 atmospheric rivers coming from the Hawaiian Islands, so our classic Pineapple Express event, but coming from the Western Pacific. It hasn't quite formed yet, that third one, so a lot of uncertainty. Here's a look at the rainfall accumulation, over 100 millimeters. This is just through to Saturday night, and that is without the added impact of melting snow. For the interior, you're going to see the impacts of this, but snow levels are quite high, 700 meters, snow levels, I should say. The freezing levels around 700 meters for places like Kelowna and Kamloops. Cranbrook at a 5 centimeters up towards Prince George. So this is a stormy week ahead. Maybe a bit of a break on Monday. These temperatures also quite mild, so that's part of the reason why we're looking at all that snow melt for Saturday. It'll be nice to have that break between Sunday and a Monday, assess what the weekend storm has done before we get into that third and final system. This is a La Nina year. This is typically our stormy pattern for the West Coast. And that La Nina is expected to stick around through the winter and into early spring. But it's just the relentlessness, Anita, of these storms and the saturated ground that has everyone concerned. I'll be tracking this over the weekend.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in Victoria right now after touring Abbotsford and the flood devastation today. Him and Premier John Horgan announcing some funding and a committee to help BC families, businesses and communities affected by the floods. Federal and provincial ministers, he says, will work together with Indigenous leadership to guide immediate and ongoing support. Let's bring in Belle Peary now. You've been monitoring the news conference with John Horgan and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Belle, what is this committee going to do?
The Prime Minister says the task of the committee will be to ensure that British Columbians get immediate resources to deal with this challenging situation, not just in urban areas, but also in remote and Indigenous communities. The committee will be led by Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth from BC and Federal Emergency Preparedness Minister Bill Blair. They'll collaborate on recovery and rebuilding efforts, and the support will go to sectors that have been hit the hardest by the crisis. The Build Back will be designed to better protect communities from future climate disasters.
And the fight against climate change remains extraordinarily important, but the fight to build a better future, resilient infrastructure in ways that is going to require our governments, municipal, provincial, federal, Indigenous, to work together always tighter and better is going to be really important, which is why I'm so pleased that John and I have put forward a joint cabinet committee that will deal with disaster response and climate resilience to map out the way forward here in British Columbia and establish a model for how we're going to move forward as a country facing increasing challenges like this.
Now, earlier today, the Prime Minister spent the afternoon touring areas of Abbotsford, largely underwater after last week's catastrophic floods. It was his first chance to see the devastation firsthand. He surveyed the damage. He talked to members of the Canadian Armed Forces as they continued their sandbagging efforts. They're trying to stem existing floodwater and to prepare for 2 more atmospheric rivers expected over the next 4 days. The Prime Minister thanked the soldiers and noted that it's been a busy year for troops responding to natural disasters. The Prime Minister also met with the Mayor of Abbotsford, with First Nations leaders, first responders and volunteers, and then it was off to Victoria. Now, there was no talk about money or how much the federal government will contribute to what the committee comes up with in terms of rebuilding. No doubt repairs will be costly. Premier Horgan says it's too early to ask for any funding from the federal government. For now, the Prime Minister and the Premier did say the governments of Canada and BC will match every dollar donated to the Canadian Red Cross to support those affected by the floods. So both governments will match individual and corporate donations. $1 will become $3, and that money will be used for a range of emergency services being delivered by the Red Cross to those in need. That could include providing cots, blankets, and cleanup kits, and to the various communities in need. Anita?
Belle Perry live for us tonight, bringing us the latest on the Prime Minister's visit. Thanks, Belle. Just a month until Christmas, as stores are working to stock up so shoppers can check everything off the list. We hear from a Vancouver toy store to understand how businesses are coping with an obstructed, overburdened supply chain. Stay with us.
Hello and welcome to Ecovana. My name is Andrea Descargar and I'm the brand owner and founder of Ecovana, and we're here to create eco-conscious essentials without the waste.
Descargar works in post-industrial recycling. She's seen what's behind the curtain.
I just got really sick. Like, I was never into, the environment before, but just seeing everything that was going on in the environment and how much is going to the landfill, we can do better than this. So that's what really helped push for Ecovana.
While still juggling her job with Green City Plastics, she started the new business last year during the pandemic. Online at first, selling reusable items like produce bags. But then she started making products like deodorant paste and package-free shampoo bars.
That just took off because they replaced 3 shampoo bottles. They're mega concentrated and really help reduce waste for anyone who showers. So it's definitely an essential product.
Demand grew and she moved from her kitchen to here. Doors opened last month.
Let's go to the back.
It's a space with room in the back for her own mini factory.
And this is where the magic happens, where we have where we make the products. Our ingredients are over there, and then this is where we package them.
Not all the products sold here are made by Descargar herself. The ones that aren't are still eco-friendly and Canadian. One key feature, this refillery station. Just take a jar or bring your own and fill up on soap.
It's less plastic in our landfill too, which is amazing, and it really helps teach our younger generations on how we could, use the things that we need, but without the waste.
Less waste is a mantra others in the community are taking on as well.
I'm slowly starting my more sustainable product journey.
Baldock first found the brand online when she became a new mom, looking to get friendlier items for her daughter.
The world needs as much help as we can give it, so any little thing that I can do, I'm really trying to slowly change over the products that I use to be more environmentally friendly, more sustainable.
Descargar is grateful for the support, especially during the grand opening over the weekend.
When I think about it, I just want to cry. Like, our hearts are so full, and like our shelves were almost like empty. Everyone really came through. We saw a lot of families come out.
It drives her to keep doing what she can by making products like these so that there's less plastic ending up in places like this.
It's hard to believe, but Black Friday is here, and for many people, it's the unofficial start to the Christmas shopping season. But with months of supply chain issues and now transportation hurdles in BC because of the floods, what challenges are retailers facing in a season when stocking shelves will be harder than stuffing stockings? Johanna Wagstaffe is the owner of Granville Island Toy Company. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
We're really not seeing a lot of Black Friday sales today like we normally do, and many retailers are saying it's because of those supply issues. Can you tell me how that's affecting you?
Yeah, it absolutely doesn't surprise me. Inventory overall this year has been a huge issue. We started out because of COVID, with factories being shut down and not enough staff and being shut down for a while, so they weren't able to produce. So that put them behind schedule. Then we had the whole shipping container issue affect us. So a lot of suppliers this year have been saying that, you know, you're going to get what you're going to get, and we likely may not have everything you want this year. So I've been preparing actually since the beginning of the year, because I was anticipating that this was going to happen, and of course it has. And now, of course, the other hurdle that we have to jump through is the issue with the flooding and getting stock from getting our shipments anyway.
So what are you doing to compensate? Are you having to raise prices, or are you not having sales?
We're raising prices because our suppliers have raised prices. I mean, I brought in a 20-foot container from Asia earlier this year that normally would cost me around $2,600 US, and that container actually wound up costing $9,000. And of course, it's not just my industry; it's just about anybody who does importing has seen those effects. So our suppliers overall have raised their prices. I think we're seeing that not just in the toy industry. I think we're seeing that, you know, industry-wide, as far as even groceries have gone up in price. So it's definitely affecting things. Am I worried about it? I can't worry about what I can't control. So I think that's the reason you're not seeing a lot of the Black Friday sales, is because retailers and suppliers are saying, we don't know if we're going to be able to restock you. So that's been the big issue.
I mean, that's a huge chunk of money, an increase in costs that I don't think people are realizing that it is costing retailers in some cases triple or quadruple the amount to bring these items in. Is there a glimmer of hope here that you may see people buy locally instead of from some of these big suppliers? Or are you thinking that the big suppliers will be able to get all their stock and it might affect you in a bad way?
No, not really. I mean, if you look at like the #1 toy line in the toy industry is Lego, and even Lego has had huge issues this year. I've been telling everybody that's been coming into the store getting their Christmas shopping done, if you see what you want now, get it now, because you probably won't find it later, because restocking is going to be next to impossible.
Johanna Wagstaffe is the owner of Granville Island Toy Company. Thank you. Well, tonight, the Van Dusen Winter Wonderland has sprung a light for the holidays. The Van Dusen Gardens Festival of Lights has made a comeback after being canceled last year due to the pandemic. Visitors can wander into the garden paths encompassing 15 acres of land spruced with more than 1 million bright lights. You can enjoy holiday treats while basking in the botanical-themed light displays set to a little light music.
See a lot of lighting elements that reflect plants and trees and flowers, and we have over 1 million lights that decorate 15 acres of the gardens, so that's pretty special. You won't really see that anywhere else in the city.
The event this year has been reduced to 25% capacity with a timed entry of 30 minutes. Visitors have to book their strolls online, and no tickets will be sold on site. Of course, proof of vaccination is required for those 12 and up, and the festival will run until January 3rd. Okay, we are going to a story now, and I want to tell you, move over, Rudolph. There's a new four-legged friend helping out this winter. It's Lobo, the snow shoveling donkey. Take a look. Lorraine O'Connor of Grand Forks saw last week's snow and made a plan, teaching her brilliant burro how to push a snow shovel. Lobo is no stranger to hard work. The 10-year-old helps around the farm, clearing barns and hauling hay for the cows. We all need a Lobo in our life. Okay, thanks so much for being with us tonight. We are back on Monday. That is CBC News at 6. But as our Premji has you covered at 11 tonight, and Isabel Regam is here this weekend. Good night.